Hello and welcome to the Formula 1 Show, or TF1 for short. My name is Tinus Ferreira, your trusty host and sharp knife that cuts smoothly through the tough steak that is Formula 1. Today I am very pleased to announce that we have a guest on the show, my fellow F1 enthusiast and Ferrari fan, Lourens. A hearty welcome to you on the show, all about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. We have lots to discuss, so let's get to it.
Thanks, Tinus. Thanks for having me. I'm a very big fan of the show and I'm looking forward.
Great. All right. So I think, firstly, obviously, where we usually start with these recaps is just to quickly skim over what happened during qualifying. Obviously, I think this specific qualifying session was quite interesting for various reasons. So I think, firstly, let's talk about the fact that Mercedes got a 1-2 again. Now, obviously, Mercedes was shocked. Ferraris were shocked. Everybody was basically shocked because I think throughout the weekend, and Lourens, you can add here if you agree, Ferrari looked the faster team.
Yeah, I'm getting quite tired of Toto Wolff and his lies. I definitely feel he almost reminds me of David Blaine pulling another rabbit out of the hat come weekend. So it's getting irritating.
But do you think it's because Mercedes actually think they're or they say that they're slower than what they are, or do you think they just have this ability to sort of develop their way into a weekend where they were truly on the back foot in practice 1 and practice 2, and then really put in the hours like on the Friday evening to get to Q3 and to the qualifying of FP3 and the qualifying to they basically reduce that gap just through really understanding their car and the setup of the car and the tyres well?
I think it's a bit of both, definitely. So they're definitely better than Ferrari with the development through the weekend. But there's definitely a case of under-promising and over-delivering from Mercedes' side.
I think, I sort of agree, but I do think that if FP 1, 2 and 3 times are, I think, and we're seeing this pattern emerging, do look to be misleading from the Mercedes' perspective. I think they just run a very different program to what Ferrari does in these practice sessions, where I think they sort of know, listen, this is what the ultimate pace is probably going to be, but they don't feel the need to necessarily show it during practices. So where they'll probably maybe run, their qualifying simulations just with the engine turned down or something like that. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if this trend continues over the weekend. But the season, yes. But I mean, this has now been another dominating display by Mercedes in qualifying, and we'll obviously get to the race later. But I just feel like Ferrari is failing to capitalize on the pace that they've been showing throughout the weekend. I mean, and I think especially what happened to poor Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, let's talk about Leclerc quickly. He basically wrecked his car into the wall like a drunk rapper in a Lamborghini.
Okay.
So I'm quite it's quite sad because I do feel that he had the pace to be on pole, or definitely on the front row at least. What's up with Leclerc and Azerbaijan? He looks quite at home on the circuit.
He's freaking fast around the circuit, which is, I guess, why he was so upset when he did crash into the wall during qualifying. I mean, I was shocked. I didn't watch that piece of the qualifying event, but when I saw it come through on Twitter, I was sitting there like couldn't believe what actually happened, because I thought, I mean, if there was ever a sure shot for pole position, it was probably going to be him, because he's just been, I mean, he had like a 4 tenths advantage over his teammate, the whole way through. I mean, Mercedes, they sort of came out of nowhere, I think, during qualifying, so I guess it would be difficult to tell how he would have compared there.
And even, I think, having only one driver in Q3 was also quite a disadvantage for Vettel. Not because we know what the effects of the slipstream is.
So that's actually interesting. I think many people mentioned that they thought Vettel probably lost out on pole position just because of the lack of a slipstream. But again, that's where Mercedes outsmarted them again for the millionth time in a row, where they basically sent out their cars before Ferrari. So in effect, Ferrari would have had the slipstream advantage at that stage.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, surprise, surprise, they decided to do a practice start. I mean, during Q3 of qualifying, which is bizarre to think about. But then Vettel had to go past, and then Vettel had to do his lap in free air, and both Bottas and Hamilton had a tow. So, I mean, they were clever, and they therefore deserve to win those extra 2 or 3 tenths if that's the type of games they're willing to play. So, I think, again, this is going to be, and we're going to probably repeat this a lot throughout the show, but missed opportunity for Ferrari again.
Yeah, I think as a massive Ferrari fan, I am so tired of, and it's a recurring thing, so tired of saying that Ferrari was outsmarted by Mercedes once again. And it's very frustrating if you have a car that could compete.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it must be extremely frustrating for Ferrari team as well, because I do think they have a very good car. I do think, however, I think there is a few, let's say, trade-offs between the Mercedes aerodynamic approach and the Ferrari aerodynamic approach that's making their cars difficult in different situations, where I think maybe the cooler conditions during Q3 yesterday might have also played into Mercedes' hands a bit, but I'm not really sure how much of a difference that could have made, but I guess we'll never know. So, I think just to finish off what happened with Leclerc and Ferrari in qualifying is I think Leclerc is right to be upset with himself, because to be honest, he is partly at fault for what happens, and I guess Ferrari also partly at fault for putting him on the medium tyres. But I think this qualifying and this race had really had the potential to cement Leclerc's standing and position in the team, and I guess Vettel outscored him again now, so it just sort of hurts his chances when in those 50-50 situations and the Ferrari team needs to decide what to do with the drivers. And, you know, those always uncomfortable team order situations. But I guess let's see how that pans out over the next few races. So in terms of Red Bull, well done, Max Verstappen. I think he did a really good job throughout the whole weekend. He was close in qualifying. He was close during the race. I think, again, he extracted maximum out of the car. So good for him, especially in qualifying. Again, good performances then by Sergio Perez, by Daniel Kvyat, and by Lando Norris. You know, putting those midfield cars right up the order when it came to the top 10. They did a good job. I don't think anyone was spectacular in the midfield when it came to qualifying, but solid job by all of them. I guess the sort of last slightly controversial thing that happened during qualifying, or I guess after qualifying actually, was the fact that Kimi Räikkönen had to basically start from the pit lane in the race due to the fact that the Sauber front wing flexed more than the allowed amount, if I can put it like that. So for those that don't know, there's basically a regulation in place that say under a certain amount of load or aerodynamic load, Formula One car's front wing is not allowed to move by more than a certain percentage. And what basically happened, I think they apply 50 newtons or something of force on the front wings, and if the wings bend by more than a specific percentage, then obviously you have to start from the pit lane. So that's basically what happened to Kimi Räikkönen there. But I guess, yeah, that's what I would probably say the most sort of technical thing that happened over the qualifying. And then lastly, I mean, Lance Stroll, again providing very, very poor return on investment for Stroll Industries or whatever the Stroll company's name is. But yeah, Lourens, I don't know if you have anything to add there around his performance.
It's very cute how he pursues his hobby.
Yeah.
Because that's basically what it is. He's not good enough, I think, to perform at that level.
But do you think, because he has shown some areas where, you know, here and there, I mean, they're not very frequent, but I mean, I think at this stage he has not really shown that he deserves to be in the Racing Point car, which is quite a solid midfield team with you know, Sergio Perez also doing well there. But yeah, I've mentioned it before on this podcast. It is laughable just the fact that his dad literally bought him a new team to go and race in. And I do think he hasn't yet paid his dues to get where he is. But let's see. I think after this season, we'll have a much clearer picture around whether Lance Stroll is worth keeping on or I guess whether he's deserving of the seat that he is in.
I don't want to spend too much time on Lance Stroll, but I think I'm just a bit sour with so I'm a bit sour with the whole Lance Stroll scenario because I feel that Esteban Ocon's place was taken in a really shit way.
Yeah, in an unfortunate way.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, Esteban Ocon is a highly, highly rated driver, and I mean, he's one of those Verstappen Leclerc contemporaries that I think, Verstappen, Leclerc, Ocon, and Albon to a lesser extent, who basically sort of were the dominant drivers coming up through karting and through the lower formulas. And it's just sad to sort of see, especially Verstappen and Leclerc thrive in the way that they're doing, and then Ocon having to, every time Bottas does something well, they just pan to Ocon sitting in the garage, just looking sad and lost. I do feel for him, and I really do hope that he does get the opportunity that he deserves. Okay, well, I think that sort of covers most of the really hot topics around qualifying, so I guess we can now move on to the main event, which was the race. And surprise, surprise, lo and behold, Mercedes once again managed to get a 1-2, their fourth 1-2 now of the season. So Mercedes has basically scored maximum points over the first four races, if you don't consider the fastest lap point in this equation, but I digress. Yeah, I mean, they did a very, very solid job. They were flawless throughout the race. They nailed strategy, nailed their pit stops. Both Hamilton and Bottas were fast when they were supposed to be. I mean, there was a mad dash during that sort of middle stint of the race where both Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas, and Vettel were really, really pushing hard. And Hamilton and Bottas, they were flying, I think, throughout the whole race, which was very, very impressive. And I think we've now reached a point, and you can sort of start to see Hamilton is now getting a bit disquieted by the fact that Bottas is, not going away as easily as he would have hoped. And I really wonder how this season is now going to start to develop sort of internally in the Mercedes team, Lourens. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think team orders is out of the question in the foreseeable future in the Mercedes team.
Yeah, I also think so, but I'm thinking more in terms of just the dynamic between the two of them specifically, because we all know what happened, when Rosberg decided to challenge Hamilton in the way that he did. I do think, Hamilton will probably still win out more often than not, just with the fact that he is as consistent as he is, and he sometimes is willing to take the second place in one race to sort of maximize his gains, and then when in the tracks that he's strong at, and Baku isn't one of them, then he knows he's gonna collect those points. So, but I'm just really interested to see.
Well, the dynamics in the change rooms was quite interesting.
Yeah,
Hamilton didn't look chatty at all.
No, I agree. I think
we all know how Hamilton gets when he's not on the top step of the podium.
That is true. And I also think it's interesting that he did his interview with Sky Sports afterwards, and he outright came and said that he was too nice to Bottas in the first corner of the race. He could have raced a lot harder and actually probably could have gone past, in his opinion. So I think it's going to be a lot more elbows out from Hamilton, I think, over the coming few races. Definitely. I think now that Bottas is showing himself to be a worthy challenger. I think then lastly we need to just congratulate, I guess, Valtteri Bottas for his win. Doing a good job. It was all down to him. He really came back after that horrible season, and he's really matching Hamilton race for race. Close in qualifying, close in the race. So yeah, good for Valtteri Bottas, and I guess good for Mercedes for being in the position that they are, which is, I guess, quite a strong one.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that Bottas might not be in the spotlight as Hamilton is, and I don't think that Bottas is as good a driver as Hamilton is, but Bottas is so solid, and at the end of the day, it pays having a teammate and having a two drivers contending for the first step of the podium.
No, I agree, and I think the sort of internal competition between the two of them has also, I think, helped Mercedes to achieve the results that they've been achieving. Because, I mean, if you think about it, when last did both Hamilton and they haven't made a mistake this whole year. Basically,
Not
they've
at
just
all.
been literally flawless, each of them in all four of the races. Now, actually, if you think back to Australia, they were way ahead. Bahrain, I mean, Bottas, I think, was a bit behind Hamilton there, but they both capitalized on Ferrari's reliability and came in home in the 1-2. China, they were strong. Here, they were remarkably strong. I thought they were very, very strong in the race.
This was not their track.
No, this wasn't their track, and they made it their track. So I think that is impressive in itself. So speaking about not being your track or being your track, Ferrari, I mean, coming away with another third place and another fifth place for the second race in a row, I don't think it's good enough from them, to be honest. I think they have to really start questioning themselves. I don't know. To be honest, at this point, I don't think anyone knows whether it's just poor sort of race management from their side or if it's just their car isn't fast enough. And I think their car is fast enough. Maybe not as fast as everybody thinks it is, but they are not managing the race as well as they should. And I also think part of that is also stemming from the fact that so far this whole season, Sebastian Vettel has just not been good enough.
Okay, I think, Tinus, I have something to add there.
Okay.
So I'm a big Vettel fan, so I hope he forgives me for saying this. But I believe that the third step of the podium should be lowered. Because Vettel seems way too happy standing on that third step and accepting almost that he is third best, where I don't think that's completely
I mean,
true.
if you think about how Leclerc reacted during qualifying after his mistake, I mean, he was furious with himself. I mean, he was...
So for me, at least Leclerc is not as lackluster about this whole season as Vettel is. I'm quite disappointed in his attitude almost towards the bad performances.
Yeah, I also agree there, and also, I mean, his weaknesses are showing up this year. I mean, I think people have always said, you know, when Vettel is in a fast car and he's leading from the front, there's probably no one better at sort of pulling that gap and managing a race from the front than what he is. But this race just showed that if he's not leading from the front, he's just not that effective. I mean, he didn't even get close to either of the Mercedes throughout the race. There wasn't even an opportunity for a pass at any stage, which is concerning to me. Especially if you looked at, you know, and we'll speak about Leclerc now, how fast he was at the beginning of the race and sort of the gaps he was pulling and sort of gaining with respect to the Mercedes. So,
and would that not be interesting? A Verstappen in a Ferrari in the foreseeable future?
I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think. I mean, you never know. You never know.
I believe that he should be in a contender for a title-winning car.
But technically, he is, sort of strictly speaking, I guess. Red Bull have been promising, you know, I know they need some engine performance, but they usually do their bit on the chassis side. So now I think if Honda can develop their engine and get them to a point where Verstappen doesn't have to necessarily lose out that much on the straights, I think Red Bull's going to be right up there. Now, in terms of Leclerc, I mean, he ended up starting from 8th, which I guess wasn't actually that bad. And I think many people, including myself, I thought that he had a real shot at, if not winning the race, I'm ending up on the podium with the speed he's been showing throughout the weekend. And especially after the first sort of quarter of the race, I was thinking, this guy is going to...
Brilliant.
He was brilliant, and he was so much faster than the others. I mean, I was shocked. And then, I mean, obviously what had happened made sense, right? So the three leading guys on the soft, so Hamilton, Bottas, and Vettel came in after about 15 laps. I can't remember the exact number, but... obviously to take off their softer tires and then also put it on the mediums, with Leclerc planning to run longer on his harder tires. Do you not think they kept him out for too long?
It was agony seeing that in the race. I wanted him to come in 10 laps earlier. You could see clearly that even from his first stint, that the tires didn't degrade as much as we thought. He did with high fuel load. 30 laps, and he still had good pace at the end of his first stint with his mediums. So I think they should have brought him in a lot earlier to utilize the softs. Yeah,
and I don't know whether 10 laps earlier would have necessarily worked. I think given that Ferrari sort of did tell Leclerc that, listen, they're worried about the life of the soft tires, that obviously, I'm assuming they just had more information around how the Ferrari would go on the soft tires. But I feel, I guess, my only question now, and I do agree that they took too long to put him on the soft tires, but the pace that he had once he put the soft tires on was disappointing. Verstappen was pulling a gap ahead of him while still being on the old medium. So I was quite interested and surprised when I sort of saw that happening at the latter stages.
Leclerc did say in an interview afterwards that Ferrari gave him instructions that he was not fast enough to gain a spot and that he should manage the race and try and get a fastest lap point. But I think Leclerc's going to have to get used to Ferrari's strategy, because that's something that's been quite questionable in the past, and I can't see it change in the foreseeable future as well.
Yeah, well, let's see. I think, and I mentioned this before, I think what this does show is, I think Vettel is currently outscoring Leclerc, whether it's fair or not, but he is now slightly ahead in the championship and he is winning the qualifying battle. So I do think the next few races are actually going to be key for Leclerc, because I think he's insanely talented and he is a very, very quick driver, good head on his shoulders. But I mean, obviously very unlucky in Bahrain as well, but he now needs to really start hooking up a weekend from start to finish. Yes. Really put through the perfect weekend like we all know he can and should be able to do. Now, we've spoken a bit about Red Bull already. Again, as I've mentioned, a very strong race by Max Verstappen. I think the way that he was able to keep pace with the two teams in front was very, very impressive. And I do feel that Red Bull is going to have to start giving him a stronger car, since he isn't going to wait around for them to sort it out. And as you've mentioned, I mean, if they don't pull up their socks, I'm sure, at least if it doesn't necessarily end up like that, but both Mercedes and Ferrari are definitely going to be interested in potentially getting Verstappen in one of their cars. Don't you think?
And I also think he deserves it. I'm not even a Verstappen fan, but I believe that he's either the best or the second best driver on the grid. And he's still very young, so he's still in his development phase.
Yeah, he can definitely still
gets more mature.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily faster, but a bit more with a bit more maturity. I can see him win in a fast car. If he was in a Ferrari today, he would have definitely.
He would have at least given Mercedes a bit more of a fight. No, I agree.
So,
and also, the thing is, just with him, is you can already see he's more mature.
Definitely.
I think he had the opportunity. He had opportunities over the past few races to do something silly or do something sort of erratic that we've seen him done in the past, or that we've seen him do in the past. But he hasn't done that this year, and I think it's paid off. I mean, consistency is key, and he's been getting those third and fourth places literally in every race. So good on Max Verstappen. Now, his ill-fated teammate, Pierre Gasly, did, in his defense, do a better job today, I thought. I mean, he started from the pit lane after all sorts of weird infringements during the practice and qualifying, which I'm not going to go into now. I mean, it's painfully boring. In any case, he started from the pit lane right from the back, and I mean, he was running in 6th place, which was quite fair play to him. I mean, he overtook all of those cars, wasn't that far off Verstappen, I think, about 17 seconds, which, given the fact that Verstappen started in 4th, was quite impressive, I thought. I mean, he was very unlucky with his engine retirement. I think this would have been a very, very strong weekend for him, given, what happened over the previous ones. So, yeah, unlucky for him. But I think the big thing for Red Bull is going to be how big are the upgrades going to be that they are planning to bring to Barcelona.
And something I just noticed, don't forget, Red Bull was fast today.
They weren't far away, I agree.
They weren't the usual 40 seconds off the pace on their own in the middle of the second tier and the first tier teams. They were very much contending. Yes,
I do think, though, I think Verstappen drove the wheels of that car. I think he was throwing that car around the track, where I think the front runners were a bit more measured in their approach. So I think probably, and you know how Mercedes is. I mean, the chances of them running their cars flat out for an extended period of time during a race is almost zero. So I think they did have some pace in hand if need be. But it was encouraging to see how close Verstappen was to both Vettel and the two Mercedes in front. So, yeah, and I think another thing we can applaud Red Bull for just you always being solid on the strategy. I mean, it's very rare that they make a poor strategy call. Sometimes they do take a bit of a more alternative approach, but usually, more often than not, it does work out for them. And I think, I mean, something that Ferrari can't say at the moment. So I think, yeah, good for them. Good for them. A bit lower down the field, McLaren, I think we can tell them good job. You know, both Sainz and Lando Norris drove very well during the race. They, you know, had a nice little battle throughout, and happy for McLaren to finally have a better weekend. I think it's been a long time coming, and they, I think, are deserving. So yeah, good for them.
It would be great if they could join the title race.
Yes, and I think if they can take this year and build, like, you know, put on a constant sort of stream of good developments and good sort of aerodynamic bits on that car, so that by the time next year rolls around, then they're going to be in the mix. And I think it's possible. I think with the team, with their resources and their history, and they know how they can do it, and they better do it. Okay, Renault, yeah, that's a horrible weekend. I mean, nothing really positive to say there. Hulkenberg struggled from beginning to end. It was just a messy race and a messy weekend for him. Ricciardo actually did quite well in the beginning. I mean, he got in front of Leclerc initially, sort of kept him behind for a bit, raced well, sort of in the lower points positions. And then, oh my gosh, I don't know what he thought he was doing when he decided to brake late on the inside past Daniel Kvyat, outbraked himself. Kvyat was sort of stuck in no man's land because he couldn't turn in. And then Ricciardo just didn't look in his mirrors and then reversed straight into Daniel Kvyat. I mean, it was a bit of a ridiculous crash and didn't really reflect that well on Daniel Ricciardo. And I think he's going to be very disappointed that he threw away, you know, a point or two at least. You know, he would have probably scored a point. So not great from Ricciardo. And I do think that Renault, I'm starting to get worried about their performance and sort of just the way that they are approaching the weekends, because I feel like teams like Toro Rosso and McLaren are really starting to step up, you know, their game and putting together good race weekends, and I haven't seen one yet from Renault.
And one quick thing to add on Renault is they're wasting two very, very promising drivers.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, those two drivers are world class, and I mean, you can see those two in a Red Bull and a Ferrari, and they'd be right at home.
They could drive for Mercedes and also win titles. So
I agree 100%. So that's why I'm saying Renault needs to I don't know, fix a few things, because it's just not working out for them at the moment. Then Team Racing Point, very good drive by Sergio Perez. He's a bit of a Baku expert. I mean, he's been on the podium 2 times, and he just knows what to do with his car on this track for some reason. I mean, even for the amount of time that he was able to keep Max Verstappen behind him at the beginning of the race was impressive to see. And, you know, he has just always been a really solid and dependable driver, you know, being there when he has to be and collecting those points. Lance Stroll, well, he did get a point at the end, but I think that's more due to his car and the fact that the Renault drivers, and I mean, Gasly. Ricciardo retired, Kvyat retired, Gasly retired. So not really a great performance by Lance Stroll. And I think sort of what we mentioned in the qualifying section, he needs to really prove his worth still to this team, because I don't think he has done so quite yet. Sauber, there's nothing interesting to report, sorry. I mean, literally there wasn't anything that caught my eye, so let's leave that there. Williams, I think you can just give a big sigh, because it's just, I mean, first the manhole cover thing with George Russell at the beginning of the weekend, and then Kubica winning it in qualifying. It's just been a shocking this whole year for them, actually, and I don't know what they're going to do.
I think for the purposes of the podcast, we can just scrap Williams and any information.
Let's see, you never know, maybe they strike gold at the middle of the night and then they just bolt this piece of aerodynamic brilliance on their car, and then all of a sudden they're right back where they used to be. But
I would be very surprised if they get 1 point, even a fastest lap point.
Well, you can't technically get a fastest lap point if you're not in the top 10, so okay, and how unlikely is that? But let's see. Toro Rosso, lastly, Kvyat got a bit unlucky. I think he was driving a solid race, not spectacular, but solid. And then Ricciardo basically just barreled past him late on the brakes and reversed into him. So not much he could really have done there. And then a second good drive by Alexander Albon, I think, in a row after China, finishing 11th. So just missing out on a point, unfortunately. But yeah, I feel a good performance by him, consistent.
Promising potential.
Promising potential. And if Gasly, as I've mentioned before, Gasly better watch out. Albon is coming. So I think overall, I guess we were sort of hoping for a bit more, let's say, drama or unexpected, crashes and safety cars. But I think from my perspective at least, I really enjoyed, especially the top 4 or 5 drivers just absolutely hammering in those fastest laps through the middle of the race, really, pushing each other all the way through, trading fastest laps. I found it really interesting to watch, and sort of that sort of building of pressure that was sort of diffused with the virtual safety car after Ricciardo or after Gasly's retirement. So I don't know what you thought about the race.
I think if you looked at the qualifying, it was action packed and thrilling to see almost the crashes and how difficult it was to drive, and the crashes of Leclerc and Kubica. Who else crashed?
Yeah, it was Leclerc and Kubica,
It was like a scene out of a Quentin Tarantino movie almost. There were so many twists and turns and intense moments, and the race just didn't live up to that. It was more like a Tuesday night bingo evening compared to the qualifying.
Yeah, I agree to an extent. I mean, I think sort of hoping for a safety car is problematic in that, I mean, safety cars are going to come less often than what you would like, I guess. I mean, and I do think the drivers are, especially in the beginning of the race, extra careful to not crash, because they know the history that this track has and how sort of difficult it is to navigate the first few corners. So I do sort of think that the drivers are consciously avoiding exactly that, where they're not going to push hard and do too many risky things right at the beginning. And obviously later on, when they're more spread out, it's easier to sort of, do the passing maneuvers or just sort of run your race more effectively. So I think that was, I guess, the main problem here.
But safety cars make for an interesting race.
Yeah, no, the only reason you wanted a safety car was
because my team was behind.
Yes, your team was behind, and a safety car bunches up the field. I mean, Leclerc was probably praying for a safety car just after his pit stop, because he was 22 seconds behind. So I mean, Lourens and Charles Leclerc were both praying for a safety car, but alas, it wasn't to be. A virtual safety car was the most exciting thing that we saw, and to be honest, it wasn't really that exciting. So I mean, a pity, but I still found this race very interesting. Obviously, looking at all of the sort of back of the room politics that's always going on. Now, as always, we have our 3 TF1 awards that we like to hand out after every race. And our first one is the Pasta Maldonado Award for stupidest deed during the weekend. And I thought it would be nice if, so I'm going to nominate one thing, and then Lourens will mention one thing that he felt deserves this award, and then we can maybe discuss a bit and then decide on an eventual winner. So for me, my nomination for the Pasta Maldonado Award for stupidest deed has to go to Ferrari and Charles Leclerc. For Ferrari, for some unknown reason, deciding that they have to put both Leclerc and Vettel on the medium tyres in the second part of qualifying, even though it was sort of general consensus that the medium wasn't really the best race tyre to start on. And I guess Leclerc just having cold tyres and putting it in the wall, he should have been more careful. His lap was already good enough to put him through into the next part of qualifying. And I think that was just youthful exuberance, ruining his weekend, I think, for him.
I agree with that. My nominee, my word. The classic blind 90-year-old lady mistake made by Daniel Ricciardo. Your classic reverse into the back of the car parking lot error he made there was difficult to look at.
Yeah, I mean, that was a bit of a rookie mistake, I'm not going to lie. Like, he you know what? He probably just didn't look in his mirrors. It was like, obviously upset that he messed up. And then he just like, I'm going to reverse. And then he reversed and then he hit Kvyat. And basically they both had to, it was just, actually, no, I agree with you. That is the most underheaded thing done during this weekend, because that was just stupid. Like, I mean, Ricciardo was just being stupid there. And I think he knows it. And he should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed, Daniel Ricciardo, for what you did. Okay, now the next award is the Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award for luckiest driver. Now, I think, again, Vettel was probably quite a lucky cat, because he was being shown up by his teammates the whole weekend through. I mean, he wasn't able to touch Charles Leclerc during practices and even during the first part of qualifying and the second part of qualifying. And then, good fortune for Sebastian Vettel, Leclerc made a mistake and binned it in the wall, and then his whole weekend was basically turned around in terms of his standing with the team. So, yeah, I think that was pretty lucky, considering where he was before the weekend started and just sort of the dark cloud hanging over him. I don't know if you had any other views around a luckier driver, but
I would just say that I think Lance Stroll was also extremely lucky for his dad being a billionaire, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think, and you'll probably see this quite a lot over the season, where he's probably going to be like a perennial front runner for the Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award, because basically every race he can count his lucky stars for being in that car that he's in, and sort of giving him those points in Formula One, because I do feel, and we've spoken about this earlier, that there are more deserving drivers, I think. But alas, let's see what he's able to figure out during the rest of the season. Now, lastly, our third award is the Nico Hülkenberg Podium Award for unluckiest driver. For me personally, I think this should go to Pierre Gasly for having to retire, after, dragging that Red Bull of his all the way from 20th place up into 6th place, and then his engine breaking down on him, and then basically not getting anything for all of his hard work. And especially given the improvement that he's shown this weekend, I thought he was really doing a lot better in comparison to his teammates.
Okay, yeah, that's true. And for me, the unluckiest driver was Leclerc for doing an excellent job. I think he was 3 seconds behind Hamilton before anyone pitted.
Yes, I think it was 3 seconds.
So he dragged that Ferrari to 3 seconds from second place.
Yeah.
3 seconds from
I think Vettel was still ahead, right?
Vettel,
and then they
pitted
Vettel, yeah.
And then Leclerc went to came within 3 seconds of Hamilton, and I really feel that Ferrari did him in, because he came out with 14 laps to go, 20 something seconds behind him. So yeah, I
agree, but I do think, and I'm gonna say here, I do think the one thing that sort of weakens his position here for me is just the fact that he shouldn't have been in 8th place to start with. I do think his mistake that he made in qualifying is sort of make his bed up for him to an extent. And I mean, he did do a good job to recover, but I do think that he shouldn't have been in that position in the first place, which is why I think the winner should be, in this case, Pierre Gasly, for just, finally putting in a good set of results and then having to cruelly retire a few laps before the end of the race.
I'm happy with that.
Cool. Now, I think the last thing that we just need to chat about is where to from here. So Barcelona is coming up in 2 weeks' time. Ferrari was incredibly fast there during testing. Many teams are going to bring updates, and I think it's a very sort of across the paddock. Everybody has the view that Barcelona, the track there, is very balanced in terms of sort of cornering requirements and engine requirements, and usually provides a good sort of view of which cars are fundamentally the fastest. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Ferrari can show and replicate the same sort of pace that they had during testing.
Let's hope and pray that the prestigious prancing horse can gallop proudly once more.
Oh yeah, that wasn't cringeworthy at all. I mean, so I do think, and I do agree that if Ferrari has a deficit to Mercedes in Barcelona, then I think their goose is cooked. I also because then I think Mercedes has now been able to basically beat them on every sort of track out there. But let's hope that isn't the case, and that our boy Charles Leclerc can finally, put in the performance that we all know he can put in. So from my side, and I guess from our side today, there are always a myriad of questions to be answered. Will Bottas and Hamilton stop smiling at each other after the race? Will Leclerc finally redeem himself over the whole weekend? Will Renault be able to bounce back? And lastly, and the most important, will Günther Steiner from Haas be able to fill up his swear jar over the next race? As always, much to ponder and much to be excited about over the coming few weeks. Now, that's it from us today. Lourens, I'd like to thank you for joining me, and I'm sure that we'll have you on many times over the coming championship to provide your views and lamentations about the demise of your much beloved red team. Hopefully you come with better one-liners next time, but I mean, we can always hold out some hope for that. Please, of course, as always, like, comment, subscribe, and argue with us online. You can find the TF1 Show on Twitter, so please give us a follow to see our views over the whole weekend and sort of just to catch up on some gossip in between and all of the interesting ongoing things in the Formula One world. You can obviously also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and basically any other podcasting service. Please then also watch out for my second part of the Top Teammate Battles next week. We'll chat to you guys soon. Bye.
Cheers.